This is it's J. Scott Confidential. J. Scott Smith here, just checking in. And I'm kind of at a loss for words. I'm not coming to you today as a journalist. I'm not coming to you today as a professor. I'm not coming to you today as someone who's worked in retail. I'm not coming to you as someone who's worked in radio. I'm not coming to you as someone with a master's degree in journalism. I'm not coming to you as someone with a bachelor's degree in interpersonal communication. I'm not coming to you as someone who has worked as a news writer for years in major markets and major papers. I'm not coming to you as someone who doesn't have a criminal record. I'm not coming to you as someone who came from a two-parent household. I'm not doing this as somebody who has accomplished a lot of things in his life and covered major events. I'm not doing this as someone who would be a quote-unquote role model to so many people. I'm not doing this as anything else. I come to you today as a black man because regardless of any of the things I listed there, I'm a black man first. It's what I always have been. It's what I always will be. I often will remind people of that I will always be a black man first. It should say something that this society, particularly the United States, will love to remind me of such. That regardless of anything I accomplish, regardless of what I wear, where I'm going, what I'm doing, what I've done, what I plan to do in the future, I'm always going to be a black man. And I don't say that negatively, because I have great pride in that. I do. Even if I live in a country that seems to think I'm not worth much. If you're watching on the video feed, I've got a notepad in my hand. Emmett Till, Rodney King, Malice Green, for those of you from Detroit like me, you know that name. Amadou Diallo, shot 19 times. They had 41 opportunities. They hit him 19 times. Sean Bell, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, and more recently, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. And those are just the names off the top of my head. Being black in America, being a black man specifically in America, is very, very, very exhausting and scary. And we have to live with this every day. Seeing the video of George Floyd being killed by a police officer, let's cut the BS. This isn't allegedly or appears to be. There's a video that shows a cop putting his knee into the back of the neck of a man who was handcuffed on the ground and pleading for help. A man older than me, bigger than me, who apparently moved to Minneapolis to try to get his life restarted. He's dead. Killed in the middle of the street as other officers stood around and watched with smug looks on their faces. This is all over the last just 2 days. It's happened so rapid fire that you almost forget about Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, who were more recent cases of black people being taken out for no good reason, whether it's by vigilante justice with big ass quote marks over it, or by the police. Let's keep it real. And don't come at me with that, but the police have a difficult job and it's not all cops. Trust me, I know. My father was a cop for 33 years. And on this podcast, previously, mind you, we've talked about these things. Philando Castile is another name. Philando Castile, in the early days of this podcast, was one of the early episodes I did. It was episode 13, from what I recall. shortly after that occurred in the Twin Cities. So we're revisiting an area where this has happened before. And that police officer was acquitted after he murdered Philando Castile. You have to understand, I grew up with a cop in my house. Previous episodes, I've talked about being trailed and harassed by police officers. And I've also talked about the story of when I turned 16 years old in 1995. The day I got my driver's license, my dad, who helped teach me how to drive, tells me, he gives me the talk that every black male gets in his life. Because every black male, pretty much from about the age of 6 to 90, has an instance where you're made to feel you're not supposed to be someplace, and someone will either call the police or the police will just show up to remind you. And you have to have a talk when you're 13, 14, 15 years old, 12, 11. Sometime in your teen years, you're going to get this talk from a parent, whether it's your mother, your father, your grandfather, grandmother, aunt, uncle. My dad, being a cop, was in a special position. Told me straight up, this is what you do if a cop pulls you over. Or this is what you do if a cop runs up on you and demands to see ID. Because that was a thing, and that still is a thing. They'll just run up on you and demand to see ID. There was a habit in Detroit, especially in the 90s, where they would just pull up in front of your house and start demanding ID, even if you were just sitting on your porch minding your own business. Here's what you do if a cop runs up on you. And he would break this down for me. And at the end of it, and these are words that didn't quite register with me at just turned 16 years old, but it registered with me pretty quickly after the fact. I know what they'll do to you. So here's what you've got to do to get home. I know what they'll do to you. So here's what you got to do to get home. The names that I listed there didn't make it home. In the case of Breonna Taylor, she was at home. Ended up dead. George Floyd lost his life over the alleged charge of passing a bad check or a fake $20 bill or whatever the hell it is. These cops saw fit to strap this man up in handcuffs, throw him on the ground, and put their knee into the back of his neck for 9 minutes. 9 minutes. John Jones, the UFC champion, tweeted this out about that chokehold, because that's what it was. It was a chokehold with the knee, called a blood choke. And he said in the tweet, I will paraphrase it, that he held him in that chokehold for 9 minutes. Maybe he was alive for 6. The thing about all of this is this is just so damn exhausting. It's so goddamn exhausting. I'm tired, and so many of us are as well. We're all tired of this. We're living in a year where a disease like COVID-19 has killed more than 100,000 people, and a large number of them have looked like me. We're living in a country that for years has tried to find excuse after excuse after excuse to harass, assault, and kill people who look like me. And there will always be someone trying to justify it. And I'm tired of it. And so many of us are too. And if it wasn't Minneapolis, it would be Baton Rouge, Louisiana. If it wasn't going to be Baton Rouge, it could be Miami, Florida. If it wasn't going to be Miami, Florida, it's LA. If it's not LA, it's Gary, Indiana. If it's not Gary, Indiana, it's Flint, Michigan. If it's not Flint, Michigan, it's Detroit, Michigan. If it's not Detroit, Michigan, it's New York City. If it's not New York City, it's Seattle, Washington. Or it's Baltimore. Or it's St. Louis. Or it's Dallas, or Houston, or Austin. It could be Omaha, Nebraska. It could be Little Rock, Arkansas. It's tiring. The crazy thing is that a lot of us recognize that no matter who you are, if you are a black man in America, you will always be reminded as such, and not in a good way. It doesn't make a difference how much money you've got, how smart you are, how accomplished you are. Thabo Sefolosha was playing in the NBA and got his leg broken by a New York cop for no good reason. Just felt he could. George Floyd laid on the ground saying, "I can't breathe." He was calling out for his mother. And these cops couldn't have cared less. They sat there with smug looks on their faces with his knee pinned on the back of his neck. Eric Garner was supposedly selling loose cigarettes. And they felt the need that he had to die because of this. Trayvon Martin was just walking home from the store and got followed home by a guy named George Zimmerman, who then killed him because he felt it was his need to question why he was there. Ahmaud Arbery was running through a neighborhood in Georgia on a day no different than the one that we're experiencing outside right now in Philadelphia. He's going for a run, for a walk, for a jog, whatever. He happens upon an abandoned house construction site, and two men saw fit to treat him like a criminal. And people have tried in vain to frame him as a criminal, but he's not. He's no different from anybody else. He gets killed in broad daylight, middle of the day, in America in 2020. And people try to smear his name. Because that's what happens when black men, such as myself, are killed. You have to justify it somehow. That's what makes the Amy Cooper thing on Memorial Day so galling and so egregious. That's what makes Tom Austin, that viral video that you've been seeing out of Minneapolis, by the way, of him accosting these four young men in a gym demanding to see their ID and proof that they need to be there. I don't even know what to say. We don't owe you an explanation for where we are. But it's so ingrained in the racial and racist history of this country that black people, black men in particular, have to vouch for being where we are at all times. And the fact that people feel that they can come up on us and demand to know why we're here. Please let it be known. If you don't actually own the building that I'm in, I'm not going to tell you why I'm there. I owe you no explanation. None. None. And the idea that you have to explain yourself. Oh, well, we've had a lot of burglaries and a lot of robberies in the area, and you fit the description. Bullshit. Now, how often they say that? Oh, there's been a lot of robberies and crime in the area, and they were just being extra vigilant. Then you find out there hasn't been a crime in the area in 6 months or a year, and they just made it up. But it's so easy to cast this, being black, as a license to be scared. I have a tweet on Twitter, at JScott that's my Twitter handle, that has gone incredibly viral, where all I did was essentially retweet an AP photo from the other night in Minneapolis, before all the rioting and everything started in Minneapolis, of police hitting protesters with tear gas and rubber bullets. The same police in Minneapolis who stood idly by 2 weeks ago when people were storming the Capitol with guns and getting in their faces and challenging them. They stood there. But people are protesting the killing of a man in his 40s, and you tear gas him. And I simply said that none of that energy was evident 2 weeks ago when people had AR-15s. I don't like the fact that that's a tweet of mine that goes incredibly viral. I would much prefer that a tweet that, I don't know, about sports goes viral, or a tweet about my podcast goes viral. But this is where we are. It's tough. I hurt every day emotionally. It cuts like a knife every day knowing that For 40 years, I've lived my life and no one really sees me as being safe. I've had to change my voice. I've had to watch what I wear. I've had to watch how I speak. The Amy Cooper thing triggered something in me even more than George Floyd. Because I hate to say it this way, George Floyd is a travesty and a tragedy. What happened to him, just like everybody else I listed off earlier, what happened to him is a tragedy. What Amy Cooper tried to do to Christian Cooper is more common in daily life than people want to acknowledge. Because I've dealt with that. I've been called scary and threatening by some white woman who couldn't get her way, so she's going to find a way to paint me as the villain. Except I didn't have video of her doing it. There's so many black men who've walked into workplaces, walked into stores, walked up and down the street, where we have to deal with that all the time. My blackness is not a crime. My skin color is not a crime. My life, my existence is not a crime nor a threat to you, but you make it as such. I've done multiple episodes that have focused on this. And I don't have an answer. The reason I say I don't have an answer is because people aren't willing to address it, at least not peacefully. People aren't willing to actually address it with a level of maturity. People want to put their head in the sand. People want to call for forgiveness, and it's not everybody, and thoughts and prayers and all this bullshit. No, I'm not trying to hear it. We need to actually have real answers, not just from federal government agencies. We have to get to the point where reflexively defending police killings of black men stops. We have to get to the point where demanding black people, black men, young and old, identify themselves to you when we are minding our own business in a grocery store or a gym or walking in a park or walking into an office building for a doctor's appointment or going to get something at the DMV or whatever. We shouldn't have to identify ourselves to some random ham and egger who's uncomfortable because his racism is starting to get to him. Being a black man in America should not be a crime. And yes, black women, I understand you deal with it too, but I'm speaking from my experience right now. So me speaking from my experience doesn't discount or dismiss yours. But I have been trailed and harassed by police. I have been followed around stores. I have been cast as the angry, aggressive, violent guy in newsrooms when I spoke up for no other reason than because of this. You're not watching in the video feed. It's because I'm black. And you can do everything to, quote, alter your voice. You can wear as many three-piece suits as you want. You can have as many degrees. You can come from the best household, live in the best possible city, live in the best family structure, have both parents there, have every opportunity in the world. But there will always be someone to remind you that you're black and you don't belong here. And we need to get to the point where that stops.